Alrighty, sure. So my talk tonight is about TeleIRC and our road from Node.js to where we currently are at Go. And so it's kind of going to go over the project management aspect of how the project started and how we kind of got a development method situated to really get what we want done. And so you can find me on GitHub at Zabel or on Twitter every once in a while at TJZabel21. And so I want to kind of give a little bit of a background of what TeleIRC is. And so it was started by a group of students at RIT. And namely, it is a Telegram to IRC bridge, which is currently written in Go. And it was created for the RIT Linux users group. Since we currently have both Telegram groups and our traditional IRC groups, where we have many different channels and many different communities who are communicating with each other. And this bridge was written to link these two communities together who would otherwise be disconnected. And with IRC being notoriously text-based, it can be really hard for a new contributor or someone who is not in the tech space to kind of get in touch with a lot of organizations, since IRC is, at least in the open source space, traditionally text-based, and they use IRC for their communications. And so with the original students who wrote TeleIRC, they eventually graduated from RIT and became alumni and had their own lives and jobs. And so development kind of became a little stagnant, but the project was still heavily used within RIT and within these organizations. And so around the same time, the Fedora Project was also looking for a way to improve their own community engagement. And they use IRC as their de facto method of communicating across all of their different groups and their different platforms. And so Telegram started to become a tool to be used as well. It's much simpler to be used, and a lot of people are familiar with it, with its traditional SMS-based view, and it's on mobile. And so TeleIRC became used throughout all of the Fedora project. And with that, it no longer became just a club project. And so with these added users, there became a lot of additional feature requests of things that people wanted, such as quality of life fixes, bug fixes. And with this large influx of new users and new issues that we had to figure out how we actually wanted to meet these demands. And so with that in came project management. We started off as a club project with just developing whatever we wanted to do at the time. But we can't really do that anymore. So we need to figure out a way that we can manage our project without being overwhelmed with all these new things that we have. And so when we get new issues in, we need to figure out, is this important? What do we actually need to do? And so at this time, a lot of our main contributors are college students, and they have their own classes, they have their own lives. And so how do we work around this while still being able to deliver these features and things that our users want? And so in comes our sort of agile method of how we go about our traditional development flow. And so here you can see our Kanban board. And so we have our traditional method of a backlog. Things that we don't directly have control over is our waiting on external. And then we get into our sprints, which are traditionally about 2 weeks to 3 weeks at a time. And so you can see our current sprint, things that we want to do in this short time frame. We have what we're currently actually working on. And then we also have things that we want to put on a wish list for what we think might be good to start working on in the next sprint in the next couple of weeks. And so with that, we really wanted to harp on the idea that we have really changing lives, and we, as students, get a lot of our own projects that we have to do for our classes, and so we need to be able to have actionable items that we can realistically do within these 2 to 3 week time frames. And so in order to solve that, we really figured out that short sprints were a really good idea, and having anything longer than 2 weeks became really unrealistic for being able to view what we could reasonably complete in a longer time frame. And so any new issues that we have that come in, we need to really make sure that each issue is fully actionable and has a direct impact on our users. So any big issues that we get, we really want to break them up into small pieces that can be really done in chunks. And also, we don't really work on too many hard due dates because everyone's lives are constantly changing. And so we use our short sprints to really bring together our lives and the features that we want to do. And a 2-week time frame, these short, small issues are really good for getting a pretty good estimate as to how much and how quickly we can actually get certain things done. And so when we actually come to the task of creating a 2-week sprint, we need to figure out what is actually immediately useful to our users. We need to kind of balance the time available that we have versus the length of how many issues we want to get in. And with that, we want to make sure that every issue that we have in our current sprint should be assigned a specific owner to be worked with. Because if you don't have an owner with an issue that is directly in the sprint that you're working with, that kind of means that your sprint is a little bit too big, and you can't really guarantee that an issue is going to be worked on if you don't immediately have an owner at the start of the sprint. And so now that we kind of had a method for going about our development, we pretty much had a stable project at this point. We had a stable influx of users, and we had our issues and our project boards. And we really wanted to kind of see how can we change what we are doing? How can we make our project better? And so we decided to move off of our original code base of Node.js to Go. And we really wanted to kind of fix what we did in our first iteration and build container first and make things a lot more lightweight and speed up our startup time of our application. And it was also just a new challenge. Go is used heavily throughout many projects today, and even our maintainers wanted to have more of a challenge and try to see if Go could be a good fit for our own project. And so this kind of came into what are the really big differences between Node.js and Go. We have this mature project, so why don't we just stay on this language and just iterate from there? And our main thinking was that Go has pretty good static typing and also compiles directly to a binary. And Go also meant a lot of new contributors for us. So at this time, Node.js was working very well for us, but we didn't really have too many active contributors on a week-to-week basis. But there were quite a good number of users who really enjoyed the Go language and who have suggested interest in working with Go in the past. And so we decided to try to see if Go could be a good direction for us. And this ended up giving us a lot new active contributors. And so when switching to a whole separate language in a software project, there were a lot of challenges that we had to figure out in order to actively and efficiently make this change. So did we make a whole new repo? Did we, how did we exactly do this? And also, what made a minimum viable product? And so what we ended up doing was creating a whole new branch and working off entirely on that, while keeping the Node.js version for our new users who wanted something stable at the time. And so our early goals for the project was to really avoid all the pitfalls that we had from the previous iteration. Our Node.js version went through a lot of rewrites, and it was kind of a bigger code base that we originally wanted. And from the start, we wanted unit testing to be an integral part of the project, because unit tests are really how we are able to make sure that things work as they are intended, so that way when we ship a release, we know that things are going to be working. And the hardest thing, at least for me, was transparency. Switching to Go was a really big change, and we wanted to immediately let our community know that this is something that we were working on, and we didn't want to exactly hide that this is going on. And we also didn't want to cut corners because with a whole new iteration of our project, we wanted it to get it done right and get done right the first time. And also with this change, we wanted full feature parity with the Node.js to the Go releases. And in order to really do that, we figured out that beta releases were a really good way to get early adopters into our project who wanted to help test out the Go releases before we actually made a stable release. And we were actually really surprised that when we started doing beta releases, we actually got a lot of external users who were submitting issues for things that were bugs or things that could be done a little bit better. And we were really actually very surprised that we got these additional users who weren't there when we had the Node.js version. And so this gave a lot of community engagement as we were currently writing our new release and working with a new language. It was really good to kind of get our community engaged with how we were actually working on this. And so our present day, we started working with the change from Node.js to Go around the summer of last year. And we really started the actual development process in the early fall. And at around March to April, we were able to get the entire Go release with almost full feature parity out the door. And we've been really pleased with how it all went. The only thing is we're just missing picture support from Telegram to IRC. And so what retrospective do we have for doing this whole rewrite? Was it worth it in the end? So no matter the size of a project, a full rewrite is really hard to do. And switching to a statically typed language offers a lot of different challenges, and there were a lot of different things that we had to do to make sure that everything was typed exactly the way that we wanted it to be. And one of the downsides of doing this change was that our users who were using the Node.js versions, they had to go a long time without any major updates. And it became a challenge that when we were going and getting issues for the Node.js version, we really had to decide, do we stop what we're doing and fix these issues, or do we just work them into the Go port and let our users know that, like, sadly, these issues won't be fixed for quite a while. And also we found out that long-term deadlines are really a fantasy. If you're trying to get a release out in 6 months, that's almost impossible to accurately judge and accurately get that done in that exact time frame. And so I can hopefully say that we did not hit any of our deadlines. And so that's the end of my presentation. I want to kind of point out a few links for anyone who wanted to look at our project or anything like that. So you can find us on GitHub at ritlug/TeleIRC. And on Telegram, we are t.me/TeleIRC. And you can also find us on IRC, and also the RIT Linux Users Group website and the Free and Open Source Initiative at RIT are also listed there. Thank you.
Thanks so
Are there any
much.
questions?
Can we please give Tim a round of applause in the chat? That was fantastic. It's so great to see like Agile being used for like a project like this. So we did have a question coming in. This is my buddy Boyan from Serbia. He's asking, are you using Telegram bots to build the interface for the IRC bridge?
Yeah, so it's actually really interesting how it really works. We have two opposing sides. We have the IRC side of the bridge and the Telegram side of the bridge. And so when a message comes in on Telegram, we need to get that over to IRC. So what we actually do is when we're ready to send the message, we call the IRC bot from the Telegram side to take our message and send it over, and vice versa for the other side. So yes, we actually have one bot for IRC and one bot for Telegram, and TeleIRC bridges these two together and makes it really easy for you to communicate cross-platform.
Okay, awesome. And I think related to that is, are you using the Telegram pull function for any part of the bridge?
Yeah, so we actually have an issue out for this. Currently, we do not have that functionality, but if you go to our GitHub, we actually do have an issue for Telegram polling, because it is a feature that we sometimes see in some of our communities. But no, we currently do not have that feature out.
Okay, cool. And I actually was curious a little bit about the testing. So you mentioned like unit tests are very important, but when you're migrating from like one language to another, like what's the like how are you starting to think about like are you migrating your test first? Can you talk a little bit about like that kind of workflow?
Yeah, sure. So the migration aspect is really challenging in how do you actually determine like what is minimally viable, and with the pure differences between the languages, it's really hard to figure out exactly how to go about it. So the way we did it, and I don't know if this was the best route, but it's what worked for us, is we first got our minimum viable thing. We wanted to see that we have a message on Telegram and it goes to IRC. Once we had that, we stopped adding any features and went in and created unit tests for just those little pieces. So that way we knew we had a working bridge, and then we want to test that it's working the way we want to, and then we expand from there.
Yeah, I definitely think like that's like sort of like when you're building something for the first time, like test-driven development, I don't know, maybe it's a little bit controversial, like is not the best way forward. It's all about like test after might be a better way.
It's definitely a discussion about whether or not building a test first or building the actual feature first is better or worse. And I mean, definitely when you're creating tests, you do end up changing the original feature code that you wrote. So it's kind of, they work really well hand in hand.
So when you say unit, like how do you define a unit?
So it's actually quite easy on the for our project itself, because we have like specific handlers for messages or photos or documents that are being sent. So we already have these really defined units of our code, and so it's really easy to just test if someone uploads a document, like how we handle that. So for us, it was actually quite simple to isolate these specific sections of our code and really test those pretty well.
Awesome. And would you say that like you're doing a little bit more integration testing, or is it more like unit testing?
So currently, we only have unit tests.
Okay.
Getting an integration test for us requires a pretty big challenge of starting up our own bots and then having bots send messages over. And for us, an integration test wasn't quite worth it. And having those unit tests, it fixes 95% of, or it catches about 95% of any issues we would have. And then the remaining 5%, we locally spin up and test out the bridge ourselves. And for us, that's worked really well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like, we've been building out like a Slack bot at Chippy, and one of the sort of the ways that like I've been finding testing would be like I mock out that boundary with like some sort of like request framework that records all my requests and responses and sort of just plays it back. It hides like the keys and stuff. So like I call that my integration test, but like it depends on like how you're looking at it. But yeah, this was fascinating. Before we let you go, do you have any words of wisdoms or calls to action for our community?
I don't know if I can think of anything. Just that, kind of, at least from the open source aspect, it's a really big world out there, and I really encourage someone to try something new and get involved with a new project, because you really never know where it's going to end up.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice. Can we get Tim another round of applause in the chat? Thanks so much, Tim, and we'll see you later.
Thank you.